Hey everybody, welcome to the Serial CEO. This is Jason Sherman. In today's episode, I speak to co-founder and CMO of Kitanica, Chris Cronin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason.
I love
Thanks
how
for having me.
before we started, I told you, Ryan, the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's just such a childhood memory. So I actually, before, I don't usually ask people this, but how did you come up with the name Kitanica? Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, kind of interesting story, actually. So we make and started the business making really heavy duty outerwear. So out of the 1,000 denier Cordura ballistic nylon when we first started. So really thick exoskeletons, and chitin is the molecular component for bug exoskeletons as well as crustaceans and whatnot. And so we are the world of exoskeletons. So Kitanica, we spell it with a K because it looks cooler and phonetically. Yeah, well, that's how I say it. We're sold around the world, so people say it all sorts of different ways. Don't really correct anybody or care as long as you spell it right, the email will go through, right?
That's very cool. And what you guys actually do, we're going to translate this to other industries, of course, because not everybody runs a clothing business. But I got to say, clothing businesses have to be one of the hardest to run because of the fact that there's so many types of clothes out there and brands. And, just in general, how do you find to get the visibility that you need in the sea of other brands? I mean, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, podcasts for one, for starters, but also, a lot of just social media, affinity groups, influencers, getting your product out there with people that appreciate and can kind of spread the word for you.
Speaking of influencers,
one thing
just to dive into that for a sec. So influencers, that's like a big topic in general, especially the past, I guess, 5 years. There's been advantages, disadvantages. What have you seen to be the challenges of using influencers?
Paid influencers are really tough to get like a return on. A lot of I've seen and used it in marketing other, other brands that they're kind of their own network and they all comment on their own posts. And so you'll pay them product and you'll see like, oh, what is this person who commented said that? You go chase down the
rabbit hole
trail who is making all these comments. It's like, oh, it's other influencers that are just like helping them apparently promote your stuff, but they're not really. They're just kind of like fake impressions and fake engagement. So that kind of sucks. And so I don't really do paid. I really just do. And that's a nice thing about clothes and expensive premium outdoor adventure gear is like people want it and they don't want to necessarily pay all the money for it. So if you load them down with gear, they will post about it and
like honest reviews.
Yeah, almost naturally too. Like, I have some hunter rancher guys that just want to live in the gear and post all the time. I'm always reposting their stuff, and that means I don't have to go out and get that content. And they're doing it in a little way that I can't do.
And that falls into the category of UGC, right? User-generated content, which has grown exponentially, and it kind of left influencers in the dust. I personally use it for my brands as well, and I seem to get a ton more click-through rates and installs and purchases on UGC because it's authentic, right? Now, I know you guys ran a Kickstarter campaign, and I've also run one unsuccessfully and one successfully, so I know what it takes to do to get what you need. What did you find to be the challenges to running the Kickstarter that other people should know before they get into it? Top three.
Yeah, top three. First off, fulfillment through Kickstarter is a nightmare. They give you one survey to get everyone's color, size, and then you don't get that, and you don't get everybody. There's no instruction. It's just like and we hired an agency actually to help us with it. And they're like, okay, so we were successful, thankfully, but we also essentially did it as a marketing employee and did not charge full rack rate on our product. So they were really driving us to discount it, and everyone's going to basically drive you to give it away because they get the return on what funds they raise. And so, we sold 1,200, but everyone got a screaming deal on this product. Like
right.
Nobody does. And so, but that's cool. If you're trying to get something off the ground, you just got to know that going in, but also the fulfillment. I'm still chasing down phone numbers from people internationally that they didn't ever give me their phone number, so I can't ship it to them.
Oh
And
wow.
then they don't do the Kickstarter anymore. And then there's Kickstarter messaging, and then you have to go chase them on email because some of those aren't actual emails. Those are just like temporary
Yeah,
Kickstarter emails.
I remember
It's an
this
ocean
nightmare.
of consumer service.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
do you recommend
Customer.
that people out there listening to this or watching this that they should not use Kickstarter and they should just try to launch on their own website with their own system?
I would try it first. But there is something to Kickstarter. It's a platform. It's great. I know other people use it really successfully. I know, a partner business that lives by it and picked up a lot of retailers through it. So that's what we were trying to get. That didn't necessarily happen through ours, even though we sold 1,200 pieces. It was all direct to consumer.
I
But it
mean,
was visible. But
from what I
you
remember,
also
you need to get
invest.
a lot of press and media, right? Like that's the Kickstarter. Like you need journalists to pick up
You need paid.
the story, right? And that costs
Yeah.
a lot of money, and you got to do it like months ahead of time and let them know here's the release date. And like most people don't do that; they just release it, they let their friends and family know, they post it on social media, and they hope that they get that $10,000 they're looking for if that's what they ask for. So let's
Yeah.
talk. Let's
One,
talk about.
one, one last thing about Kickstarter that no one really knows, and I learned this once we hit the 100,000 mark in funds raised, that only 4% of Kickstarters make over $100,000 and raise over
Oh
$100,000,
yeah.
which which is, I mean, there's so many Kickstarters out there, so I guess that makes sense. But it's just you only really hear about the ones. Oh, they made 4 million. They're golden now, and it's
Oh
like, yeah,
no,
but
that
they spent
they
3 million in advertising.
yeah. I was gonna say they spent that budget on press and marketing, because
Mhm.
usually people are trying to get 10 to 25,000. That's the sweet spot. For
Mhm.
when I had done one of my first documentaries, I was going for 10 and I got 25. So I was like, oh, I got way more than I wanted. But
Right.
you're making this gear in the U.S., which has to come with its, again. There's upsides and downsides to everything, but I mean, I would just think making things in America has got to be good for the brand because you're in America and Americans want to support American companies. But what are
Mhm.
the challenges to that when you could probably get it for like a quarter or even an eighth of the price
Yeah.
overseas?
Well, knockoffs for one. So we're a premium good, and there's companies knocking us off left and right. Amazon is completely complicit in it. They sell our trademark name as a keyword search term for these knockoff
Wow.
companies. Knockoff companies just they have their Amazon build out is far beyond what we do because we don't even sell on Amazon because I mean we do have a partner that sells for us on Amazon, but certain products that make sense on Amazon versus our $700 Cordura jacket sewn in the United States. They'll sew it in China and sell it for 100,
Mm.
and all day long for every product, almost not every product, but all the ones that sell really well and people are searching for it. They're making them, and I just saw a pair of pants yesterday that are our pants that are stitch by stitch knockoff, sold over Amazon. We've put in many complaints. We have an attorney working on it. They won't do anything about it. There's just, and they
Jesus.
do it across all industries on Amazon, and
Ugh,
it's a nightmare. But
that does not sound
not the
good.
real thing. It's not the real thing. It's not the same quality. I mean, we focus on quality and overbuilding things, and then
I've
there are
heard.
companies also that go and steal they put out the knockoff and they steal people's identity and they
Yeah.
install malware and like
I mean,
there's a lot of
I've seen this
gnarly stuff
before.
out there.
Just not just clothing, but I mean every single product that ever comes out. I mean, you watch Shark Tank. I mean, everybody watches Shark Tank, and you watch the entrepreneurs go there and pitch their idea, and the next thing you know, they say, "Well, isn't this easy to do? Can anyone else do it?" You're like, "Oh yeah, but you have several knockoffs." I mean, there's always going to be knockoffs. I think at the end of the day, you can't knock off branding, right? Branding is what
Right.
matters. So, like, you can make another type of Coke, but the brand name Coke is so powerful and ubiquitous around the world for soda that you can buy the RC cola or the shopping brand cola and it's not Coke, right? So I think you have that
Mhm.
advantage, and I think the made in the USA label helps you. Why is it on the upswing? I've noticed a lot lately that made in the USA tagline is like kind of like the future of fashion.
Well, most things are made in China. Certainly apparel, I think the majority of it is made in China. And you know, there's a real negative sentiment towards China and doing business with China. And not so much for the other Asian countries. We do have a bag line that is, we designed everything and made all the samples and then sent the samples to a factory that we use in Vietnam for our bags. And people don't have that visceral reaction that they do when you talk about China and making things. Vietnam's way more friendly. They make the really reputable bag makers out there. Most bags come from there. Anybody making a bag wants to make it in Vietnam because they are so good at it. And so we're proud to do it there and have an incredible partner. But getting that story across is really tough to do. But yeah, the one thing about making clothes in America is you got to continue to innovate and stick to your quality guns, because they're only imitating. They're not the real thing. And if you just keep one step ahead, coming out with new products, being the brand that you are versus what they're trying to be, it's almost like an ocean. It's trying to boil the ocean is trying to fight all the copyright infringement over the internet right now. In music, happens in kind of.
I was going to say, you see this everywhere, right? I mean, yeah. You always see like the Facebooks and the Googles of the world trying to copy the apps that they want to buy, and the apps turn down their offers. So then they just copy them, but then they fail and they shut it down. And I'm like, why are you copying the app that's successful? They don't want to sell to you. Doesn't mean you have to copy them and then fail. It's just leave it alone, right? You said innovation, right? They don't know how to innovate, it sounds like, right?
Not in that space, because they don't know the consumer like we know the consumer. But also it happens in almost across so many industries where the retailer themselves will knock it off. Like a Cabela's, if we sold our premium, they'll sell a Patagonia jacket. Let's say they sell a Patagonia jacket that's $250. They'll be like, oh, that's selling really well, we should have our own. And then they have their own factories and they make their own version. It's a little bit different, but it's very much the same, and it's $100 less, and it's all the right profit next to it.
But let me ask you a question. So like, okay, so yours is 250, theirs is 150. You would have gotten maybe 100 in profit from the jacket if they sold it for 250, and then they get the rest. I guess I don't know how it works at wholesale retail prices, but isn't it worth it to not do that? Make the profit they're going to make working with the creator of it, and then using the brand as a plus. Like, okay, this is made in the USA. It's made by this, Kitanica brand that's well known, and you guys are going to promote their store on your social media, so they're getting free marketing. So doesn't that make more sense, or am I missing something?
I think they want both. They have enough consumer traffic to support both, and if they didn't, they would either not carry us, which they don't, but or they wouldn't make their own. And I think that they would figure that out. Their analytics team would tell them what's revenue positive and not. But yeah, I mean, there's the brand is key, and it's where it all starts, and it starts all these different kind of versioning and imitators, and it just kind of defining the space.
It sounds like to close things out, like the top three things somebody would need to do in order to launch a successful clothing brand is, number one would be the brand, is make sure you have that really clear. What are the other two?
Production and sourcing. That's the hardest thing in the clothing business. We actually started our own factory so we have sewers in-house that are on the payroll that sew every day, make our gear, because you'll get it back and it won't be right, and then you won't be able to sell it.
Right.
That is the shackle it haunts every clothing manufacturer. You get, especially overseas, what are you going to do
when you get 100,000 units? Yeah,
get 100,000 units, and they all smell like fish or something, and you don't even know how they're going to come.
There's no zippers.
How, but they're coming to you, and they're not going to be able to sell them, or you'll have to finish them somehow, like redo the cuffs on the pants, or like this pocket's not where it's supposed to be.
Jesus like that Christ, kind of thing. I can't even imagine.
No, it's a nightmare. And it's happened to us. It's happened to us with the U.S. manufacturers too, which is why we, it's not just overseas.
But they can be held more accountable. You can hold them more accountable.
You got to hold their hand, and you got to sit through it and know what you're doing. Like my brother started the company with us, and I mean, he's the designer, so it's all kind of around his designs, and he's always been able to sew everything he's designed.
Got
So
it.
he has that expertise. And it's like, I mean, I would be terrified to go in and like try to
Same.
make a fanny pack without being able to make a fanny pack. Like we
Right.
sewed samples and sent them to him, and we're like, okay, we want this. Don't
Right,
make
right.
it differently. Here's the thread we're using. Here's the fabric.
Right.
We want YKK zippers, Cordura fabric. It needs to be heavy duty. We're not jacking around. And
So you provide the blueprint and they just, the template, they just have to copy it basically.
Yeah.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's probably more than 3, but
Yeah, no, we're good. We can
Yeah.
let people know where they can actually buy this stuff. It sounds awesome.
yeah. Kitanica.com, KITANICA.com. Everything's sold direct there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And you guys are on socials on Kitanica as well. I noticed
Yeah.
everywhere.
Kitanica U.S.A. is Instagram. That's where we focus mostly.
Awesome.
But that all translates to Facebook too. So
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Everybody check out Kitanica.com. Grab your outdoor gear made in the USA. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Anytime.